Hi guys, my name is Davy and I'm doing my presentation on John B. Watson. John was born in Travelers Rest, South Carolina on January 9th in 1878 and he died at the age of 80 on September 25th, 1958. He went to Furman University and got his master's at age 21, which is cool because all the things that I read talked about how before this he wasn't very good in school, and he just talked about how he didn't really like school. Then he went on to the University of Chicago, and here he started to develop his theory of behaviorism, and he got his doctorate. Then he started to work at Johns Hopkins University, and there he had some pretty profound work on behaviorism and some cool experiments that we'll talk about later. Also, in one of his experiments, he had an assistant, Rosalie Rayner, who he actually ended up having an affair with and ended up getting kicked out of Johns Hopkins University. So that's kind of interesting. After his career in psychology, he went on to advertising. So he didn't spend his whole life in psychology. He developed the theory of behaviorism, and he talked about how for behaviorism to be a real science, there needed to be a push to only study observable behavior. He said that controlled laboratory studies were the best way to study behavior, or to study learning. And he was inspired by Pavlov. He heard about the experiment that he did with his dogs and about conditioning, and that's kind of what he started to base his theory of behaviorism on. And the theory of behaviorism is that you can control behavior by manipulating the environment. Little Albert is an experiment that he did, and this is actually the experiment that he did with the girl that he had an affair with. They had little Albert, who was a baby who was 11 months old, and they conditioned him to fear white rats by every time they'd show him a white rat, they'd make loud noises and make him cry. And so initially little Albert didn't have a fear of white rats, but he did have that natural fear of loud noises that would make him cry. And so every time that he saw the white rat and heard the loud bang or whatnot and started to cry, he was conditioned to fear just the white rat, and if he saw that without the bang, then he'd start to cry, which is not ethical in today's world. Watson once said, "Give me a dozen healthy infants, well-formed, and my own specified world to bring them up in, and I'll guarantee to take any one at random and train him to become any type of specialist I might select. Doctor, lawyer, artist, regardless of his talents, penchants, tendencies, abilities, vocations, and race of his ancestors." And this he said to kind of show what he meant by, your environment shapes who you are. Some contributions and limitations of the behaviorism theory. Some contributions were that it really kind of amped up the nature versus nurture talk, and what really does make us who we are. Is it nature? Is it nurture? Obviously, he thought that it was nature, our environment. He also helped us learn that early experiences shape us. We can see with little Albert, he conditioned him to fear a white rat, and so our experiences as children can give us fears and phobias and kind of shape our personality. He also was very influential in Skinner, and then behavior principles are also used today in animal training and advertising and in therapy rooms and in schools. Some limitations of behaviorism, and especially of Watson, was he was kind of radical. A lot of the articles that I read talked about how he really didn't have good relationships with his children, and a lot of his research was based on child development and learning. And so, I don't know, it's just kind of interesting that he focused so much on child development, but yet he didn't have good relationships with his own children. His views towards child rearing. One article I read talked about how he felt like you shouldn't show children too much love because then they would develop a needy personality as an adult. So just give them a few hugs and kisses here and there, but treat them as miniature adults is what one article said. Another limitation of behaviorism is that it doesn't account for internal motivation and thoughts and our own agency, but contributes everything to the environment around us, and that controls our actions. And obviously everyone learns differently, and so not one theory is going to work perfectly for one person. Some applications for teaching. In the classroom, you can set up reward systems like token economy, where when students do something good, they can get a reward, and that will help encourage them to continue to do good behavior. Also, positive behavioral interventions and support, PBIS, is something that schools use, which is, again, just reinforcing positive behavior. And then positive and negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement, giving something when a child does something good, and negative reinforcement, taking away something. And so all these can be used for applications in the classroom. These are the resources that I used, and thanks for listening.